Well, the news is filled with charges and countercharges about what to do about immigration, but also what's going to be done with the FBI, which has been so badly tarnished. Well, the infamous FBI agent who vowed to stop President Trump's election was escorted from the Bureau yesterday. That walk of shame came shortly after angry congressmen heard the Justice Department would look closer into Peter Strzok's role behind the scenes of the Russia probe.
Strzok's angry anti-Trump text could become a key element in derailing that long investigation. Charlene Aaron has the story.
FBI agent Peter Strzok, who had written a number of text messages critical of President Trump, was escorted out of the Bureau's headquarters Tuesday. This after the Inspector General report revealed more texts, including one where he promised to stop Trump from becoming president. On Tuesday, Inspector General Michael Horowitz said that the text is the basis for an investigation into Strzok's behavior in the Russia investigation.
Do you believe this text shows political bias?
I think, as we found, it clearly shows a biased state of mind.
And if so, do you believe the political bias shown by this text had an effect on the initiation of the Russia investigation?
I think, as you know, Mr. Chairman, that's a matter we've got under review and are looking at right now.
More to be determined on that.
More to be determined.
House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy hammered Horowitz over the FBI's handling of the Russia and Clinton probes.
And then we get to August 8, 2016, less than 2 weeks after the Russia investigation even began. The lead FBI agent says he will stop Trump from becoming president. This is 2 weeks into an investigation, and he's already prejudged the outcome. And we're somehow supposed to believe that that bias was not outcome determinative.
Horowitz agreed that Strzok's actions were egregious and worthy of investigation.
I can't imagine FBI agents suggesting even that they might use their powers to investigate, frankly, any candidate for any office.
Democrats continue to cling to the official finding that the agent's bias did not influence the outcome of the investigations.
While the report is highly critical of Director Comey, it did not find that he was biased against President Trump or in favor of Secretary Clinton, as some have alleged.
Congressional hearings into the IG report will continue, and Peter Strzok's attorney says he is open to testifying. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Well, the thing about Strzok is he's still on the payroll. He's still working. He's still getting a check. I guess they escorted him out of the building, but he's still there. And it was like Lois Lerner. She was about as bad as you could get in terms of bias against Christians, religious organizations, etc. And yet she kept on getting a paycheck, and she pled the Fifth, and they never did anything about her. She was clearly in contempt of Congress, and nothing was ever done. So I do hope this time that if the congressmen find the Justice Department in contempt, that they will put some sanctions on and really make it stick, because these guys can skate free. They still get their money. They don't get anything but a slap on the wrist, and so big deal. Well, in other news, President Trump met with Republican lawmakers last night to discuss solution to the immigration crisis. John Jessup has more on that.
Well, Pat, more than 2,300 children of immigrants crossing the border illegally have been sent to shelters along the southern border. Observers visiting 3 shelters describe playrooms filled with crying preschoolers. President Trump traveled to the United States Capitol Tuesday evening to discuss the issue with Republican lawmakers.
The immigration system, it's been a really bad system, probably the worst anywhere in the world. We're going to try and see if we can fix it.
The House is expected to introduce 2 immigration bills later this week. Well, General Electric, once considered the bluest of blue-chip stocks, is dropping out of the Dow Jones Industrial Average due to poor performance. The Wall Street Journal reports GE shares have plummeted 55% in 52 weeks, losing more than $100 billion. GE is an original member of the Dow, having been part of the index since 1907. Walgreens Boots Alliance is taking its place on the Dow's list of 30 top stocks. Analysts say the change shows how traditional manufacturers struggle to adapt to a new technology-driven economy. Pat, a huge fall for GE.
Well, you're looking at your brilliant leader who just bought a number of shares of GE stock about a month ago. They used to call them the dogs of the Dow. You bought one of the dogs, and they had a great future ahead of them. GE stock was down about $3.50 a share or whatever. It's supposed to go up to about 20, and it's just incredible how that great company that had a chairman who was hailed as the genius of, the Sigma 6 and all that stuff, they've been torn all to pieces. And I think they'll come back, though. The thing about GE now is become a leader in renewable energy. And that's why I'm invested in it. And I think
that's why you're going to hold on to your stock.
Well, I'd be crazy to sell it at a loss right now.
Right, exactly.
It couldn't get much worse than it already is, I hope, unless it just goes bankrupt. But these renewables, everybody's talking about wind, they're talking about solar and this kind of stuff, and it looks like GE is now organized a division that has a potential to really take a lead in that. So they may be moving away from some of this other stuff. They're not selling refrigerators and things like they used to, I guess.
Well, hold on to that dog then.
Well, the dog of the Dow. I'll let you know if it comes back. If not, I'll have egg all over my face. All right, John, what you got?
Well, Pat, the United States is dropping out of the United Nations Human Rights Council. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Ambassador Nikki Haley made that announcement Tuesday. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, it's one more sign that the Trump administration believes the UN isn't living up to its original purpose.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo explained the U.S. decision.
Today, we need to be honest. The Human Rights Council is a poor defender of human rights. Worse than that, the Human Rights Council has become an exercise in shameless hypocrisy, with many of the world's worst human rights abuses going ignored, and some of the world's most serious offenders sitting on the Council itself.
Pompeo noted those serious human rights offenders sitting on the Council include China, Cuba, and Venezuela.
The United States, which leads the world in humanitarian assistance, and whose service members have sacrificed life and limb to free millions from oppression and tyranny, will not take lectures from hypocritical bodies and institutions as America selflessly give their blood and treasure to help the defenseless.
When a so-called Human Rights Council cannot bring itself to address the massive abuses in Venezuela and Iran, and it welcomes the Democratic Republic of Congo as a new member, the Council ceases to be worthy of its name. And then, of course, there is the matter of the chronic bias against Israel.
Both Pompeo and Haley said the UN body had become a vehicle to bash Israel.
And the Council's continued and well-documented bias against Israel is unconscionable. Since its creation, the Council has adopted more resolutions condemning Israel than against the rest of the world combined.
Hillel Neuer of the UN Watch told CBN News the Council unfairly singles out Israel for criticism and condemnation that no other nation faces.
At every session of the Human Rights Council, for example, there's a day on Israel, just like there's a day on human rights situations around the world, and then there's one day just for Israel. It's a special agenda item only to criticize so-called Israeli violations. There's no agenda item for genocide that happened in Darfur and Sudan, nor on North Korea, one of the most horrific places on the planet for human rights. Only Israel, the Jewish state, gets its own agenda item. The effect is to demonize Israel.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the U.S. decision, saying the UN obsessively focuses on Israel, the one democracy in the Middle East, instead of dealing with regimes that systematically violate human rights. Haley left the door open to return to the Council if things changed.
We will continue to strongly advocate for reform of the Human Rights Council. Should it become reformed, we would be happy to rejoin it.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Pat, no doubt you support the decision to withdraw from the Council.
Absolutely. I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations has become a forum for dictators to vent against democracy. And some years ago, I made a speech to the Council on Foreign Relations where I recommended that they set up a new agency that you would call the Council of Democracies or Democratic Nations or something like that. I think when you've got that thing was set up right after World War II, and of course the powers who were the Allied powers have the veto in it. So you've got the Security Council that has a veto, then you've got the General Assembly, which is open to everybody. And these little pipsqueak countries that may have 300,000 or 400,000 people have the same vote in the General Assembly as the United Nations and the United States does with all those hundreds of millions of people we've got. And it's just weighted wrong. But then the Security Council is such that the Russians have a veto, as do the Chinese. And I think it's screwy. We need to reorder that thing. The United States is paying about 30% of the budget of the United Nations, and yet it's become a sounding board of anti-democratic rhetoric. And I think it's time to stop paying their bills and just say, look, not only will we withdraw from these stupid agencies, but we also won't pay for the bills anymore. And we want another organization. I think it's time to get a new one. And I think intelligent people are looking at that and saying, well, the United Nations is broken. It is not a good forum any longer for the nations of the world to sit in. As Winston Churchill said, it's better to jaw than to war. I agree with that, but let's get some place where you've got equal people doing the jawing, not a bunch of dictatorships and anti-Jewish regimes. So that one symbol, it just shows the determination of the Trump regime, but I think we've got to get a lot of public opinion to say, let's reorganize the whole blooming thing. John.
Pat, Israeli authorities indicted a former cabinet minister on charges of spying for Iran. 62-year-old Gonen Segev is charged with assisting the enemy in war and other espionage-related crimes. Segev served under Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin as the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure from 1992 to 1995. Israeli authorities say he had his first contact with Iranian officials back in 2012 at their embassy in Nigeria. He reportedly made 2 trips to Iran and regularly passed on information about Israel's energy and security sectors. Well, some good news to report here. New studies show smoking rates among American adults have hit an all-time low. According to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, only 14% of American adults said they were smokers last year. That number is down from 16% just 2 years ago. The rate has continued to decline from 50 years ago, when 40% of adults in the United States said they smoked. Well, Charity Tillemann-Dick is a chart-topping opera singer. What makes her accomplishments even more amazing is she's singing with someone else's lungs. Lori Johnson tells us how she overcame major medical obstacles to once again lift her voice in song.
Opera singers need very strong lungs. So imagine how hard it would be to do this after having a double lung transplant. Not once, but twice.
After Charity Tillemann-Dick was diagnosed with a rare, fatal lung disease, Cleveland Clinic surgeons performed the first of her life-saving transplants.
It is a literal miracle every time I sing.
Years later, her new lungs failed. She underwent another lung transplant, an ordeal she chronicles in her book, The Encore.
It encapsulates what life is for all of us and what all of us want. We all want another chance.
She got back on her feet again, thanking God, her doctors, and her donor.
That she would give me everything that she had left of her life is so tremendous. It's so humbling.
She's now good friends with her donor's daughter, even singing with her in what was, in a way, a mother-daughter duet. Sadly, only 20% of donated lungs are healthy enough for transplant. Although in the last decade, more organs are becoming available from the tragic increase in opioid overdose deaths.
These are people, median age is actually around 35 years old, who have gone on to pass away. They have generally very healthy organs.
Believe it or not, lungs infected with hepatitis C may soon be transplanted into people who don't have it. Although infecting the recipient is virtually inevitable, new treatments can cure it.
So you would be adding 1,000 donors to the North American donor pool that weren't there before. That would be 1,000 lives we could save.
The easiest way to become an organ donor is by registering on UNOS.org, United Network for Organ Sharing. It's recommended you discuss your wishes with your family. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thanks, Lori. Pat, what an amazingly inspiring story.
It's remarkable. You know, I was down at the University of North Carolina in their heart hospital, and I talked to a doctor who was, I thought, doing some pioneer research in that. And I looked at a pair of lungs, and they're the most awful-looking things. They really are.
They really were pretty gross looking. It was gross.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And yet they've transplanted these things, and they work with people. So he was taking lungs, as I recall, from cadavers, and they were transplanting them, and it was pioneering work. But the Cleveland Clinic apparently has done this. And you've got to have live, I mean, you've got to transplant the lungs almost immediately after death. They can't be hanging around for a long time.
Wow.
But to think that these lungs would be working and somebody could be singing opera, that's just wonderful. I mean, you know, my hat's off to our medical professions. We have extraordinary medicine, and our doctors and nurses and medical professionals, they do a fantastic job. So at the forefront, these people are working ceaselessly, tirelessly, to create these new things. And aren't you glad you live in a land, and we should be grateful, we live in a land where we can have innovation of this nature and see that. It's just very heartwarming.
Very remarkable indeed.
Okay.
Thanks, Vowed.